everybody, and welcome to the council meeting of Wednesday, the 1st of May, May Day. Welcome to the meeting. Welcome councillors, staff, media, members of the public, and all those listening in at home. Call for apologies, and I have three today, of Councillor Brahm, Councillor Lovett, and Councillor Meckle. So I'd like to move we accept those apologies. Councillor Todd, Councillor Hooper. All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Extraordinary business, I know of none. Declarations of interest on today's agenda. Then confirmation of the minutes, and we'll look at them for accuracy on page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. I'll move in a second to the accurate record. Councillor McMillan, Councillor Wilson, all in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Councillor McMillan.
You're using your Neil Brown microphone, so
oh.
No one else can go and read while you're using it. You need to use the share.
There we go, thank you. Got to confirmation of the minutes. Item number 5, page 7, Community Roading Reference Group, and we'll receive those minutes. Move in a second for that. Councillor Cameron, Councillor Todd, all in favour, please say aye. There's a recommendation there, but is there any discussion on those? No discussion. There's a recommendation to council that the Community Roading Reference Group terms of reference be adopted. So move in a second. Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to move that. Thank you.
Councillor Todd. Any further discussion? Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Carried. Item number 6, which is the Ashburton Bike Skills Park, and we have a deputation here. Welcome, Walter. I believe you're representing the group. If you'd like to perhaps introduce others you have with you, and we're going to decide on the concept plan shortly, but if you'd like to tell us what you are thinking. Oh, it's Ian and Bert.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the spokesman for the group that is involved in developing the concept plans for the Bike Skills Park. Perhaps I'll just ask our groups that are at the back to just stand up and say who they represent.
So, Walter, if you might introduce them, because otherwise the live stream we have won't hear them. So if you could perhaps introduce them.
Okay. Sorry. Sport Canterbury. The
Alice. Yep.
Sorry, Alice. I'm shocking with names. Safer Mid Canterbury. Two representatives from the Lions Club and also representatives from the Rotary Clubs of Ashburton.
Great to have you all here supporting this project.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go into the concept plans as such. That's all going to be discussed, but really I think as a representative of the groups involved, there's good community support for this project. We're not unique. There's already 2 bike skills parks in Christchurch, one in Timaru, one in Oamaru, and I think one in Dunedin. We do see it as a really important project for teaching children bike skills. I think one of the big things for me is that we are apparently going to have trains rolling through this town at 80 kilometres an hour. We have got uncontrolled pedestrian crossings, and so part of this Bike Skills Park is to teach the signage that goes with rail traffic. We will also hopefully have traffic lights. What we have developed as a concept is great to have, we can thin it back a bit depending on funding. Obviously, that's going to be the primary driver. We do have, I believe, a comprehensive plan to show you that has been costed and also double checked by a second QS. So we're relatively confident about the figures. Having said that, these sort of things are quite subjective. So you can imagine one of the discrepancies between the two QSs that were doing the job was whether we can reuse the material from the existing pump track, whether we have to cart away any of the fill that we're going to take out, or whether it can be reused on site. Those sort of the big items that cause reasonable amounts of extra cost if we can't utilise that sort of stuff. So we're reasonably confident about the hard landscaping part of it. It's those sort of things that we just need to look at. In general terms, I don't believe we should start this project until we're fully funded. It's not the sort of project that you can have half done. It's also, given where it is, not the sort of project where you can actually bring in service clubs to do different bits of it. I do believe we will have to go to an open tender and pick one contractor. There's lots of health and safety issues with doing something like that in the Domain. I do believe this will be a great asset for the community. I think you've absolutely got us in the right place in the Domain, and really just asking for council support for the concept plan. So if there's any questions.
Thanks, Walter. Yeah, it is an exciting project. It's been on our books for quite some time, and moving it forward as it's happening is really good for council to see some action there. So, Councillor Laws, any questions? Councillor Cameron.
Just with regards to the design, Walter, thank you for this. It looks tremendous, like just outstanding plan. We've got the little train sheds here. What are they, number 7? They're called train station shelters. Were they put in subsequent to the speeding trains through the town, or were they already in the design?
The actual shelters are more an aesthetic than anything.
Okay.
So they would be one of the things that if we found that we had a funding shortfall that we might relook at.
Okay.
But in general terms, it's pretty much, it hasn't changed much since the original concept we were given. Actually, we haven't come in, and we were reasonably thorough with our briefing to Botanics. Because they already had experience in the Domain, I think that's made it a lot easier.
It looks, to credit to the clubs and everybody involved, it looks wonderful.
I've one question. It might be for you, Walter. It could be for Ian shortly. But in the plan, I see there's a cattle stop, and I don't think children would see many cattle stops today. Why is a cattle stop included? Or is that if Ian, you might want to answer it later or now, whatever.
Yes, through the chair. The cattle stop was really just tipping the hat to the amount of variance that one might find on roads, and bearing in mind that this isn't just a skills park for the children, it's also for our migrant communities to give them an understanding of what they might find in our district. And a cattle stop on the gravel section of road that on track that was added in amongst the trees was seen as being something that does occur in the rural environment, and it just makes it a little more real.
Thank you.
If I could add,
Yeah, Walter.
Riding a push bike over a cattle stop, you do need to be square on, and it's a lesson that needs to be learnt.
The easy way or the hard way. Yeah. Councillors, any further questions? No, thanks, Walter, for that, and your team that you've got behind you doing it. It's really good, as I said before. So we're going to move into the report there now, and it's item number 6. And Ian, we have you and Bert. So if you would like to, is there anything further you'd like to add to the report you have?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say thank you to Walter for his assessment of the project. He's encapsulated it very well, and we're happy to take questions on the body of the report.
Okay, councillors, questions? Councillor Cameron.
I was interested in the maintenance. I think I read $25,000 a year. I just can't find it now, but was that what's ETA?
Yes, through the chair, that schedule is probably a worst case scenario. We have looked at our expenditure on the current pump track as a way to get a feel for what the costs could look like for maintaining what is a cycle and a small wheeled track facility. It is very minimal, so it is a worst case scenario, and with the exception of the repainting and things like that that will crop up in that schedule every 3 to 5 years, it's generally a basic level of maintenance that we believe most of it will be able to be accommodated within the existing budgets, where leaves are blown off surfaces and things like that.
And I also see there's an annual because I'm anticipating there'll be no, it's a hard surface primarily, and perhaps a little bit of weeding on the woodland area, I'm guessing. $25,000 seem a lot for a can of spray and a little bit of weeding, because the hard surface generally wouldn't deteriorate over the first or the second or the third year, I'm guessing. And the vandalism, are we now budgeting for vandalism, which is a very sad state of affairs that we have to budget for vandalism?
Through the chair, I regularly budget for vandalism in my general open spaces OPEX budgets. It is a sad state of affairs, I agree, but it is something that when we don't, as we've experienced in our public conveniences, we can be hit with significant unbudgeted expense.
Yeah, I think that we shouldn't wear that, but I understand the difficulties in getting that back from the vandals, but I don't think it's their responsibility to wear that. Thank you.
Hamish?
Through you, Mr Mayor, just noting clause 14 of the report refers to the annual repairs of 21,744, so I know we've broadly discussed 25,000, but that's actually, it is slightly less than that. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Hooper?
Thank you. Ian, can you tell me a wee bit more about the reformed pump track? When you say reformed, are you totally sort of digging up what's existing now, or is it just adding bits to it?
Yes, through the chair, it is a complete rebuild. So the new footprint will encompass some of what is currently in the pump track existing. So we will take the complete site back to level and then rebuild with hopefully with the materials that are there that we can reuse to form up some of the contour that will be required.
Yeah.
And it will be reformed so that it has linkage into the existing as the maps and the plans dictate.
Yeah, so you couldn't add to the existing, it just wasn't going to work?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
A question. It's on the map, page 20 of the plan, and it's on the legend. It's number 2, and you've got a new footpath going in there. It doesn't seem to me to be part of the track. Why are you putting a new footpath in?
Through the chair, that linear path is one of the proposed extensions in the domain development plan. So whilst it's featuring here in this design, that's not intended to be funded within this project. As mentioned, Canopy Design have done the domain development plan, so they've done some overlays of the future plans that they have done that the council's already consulted on and had adopted. So that's not necessarily a path that will come to fruition, but the one out to the path to the driveway is.
Yep. And will that'll be like a little fine gravel path, not asphalt?
It's concrete, Mr Chairman. Yeah.
Should we be putting concrete and asphalt and tar seals on our domain for being an open space and not use more natural materials like fine gravels?
Through the chair, in a perfect world, but we are looking to recreate a streetscape which has got solid surfaces that we can put the spray paint markings on. The point you raise is also one why we will need a resource consent is around the coverage, site coverage with hard material on the actual Ashburton domain.
Yeah, needs to be thought about, I think. Yeah, and using petroleum products on a open space where you don't need to. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. fantastic plan. It's excited to see it and the development it will give the domain. Just a question, I suppose, for the group is, I mean, obviously there's a lot of hard work now got to go in raising the funding to make this happen once we've got through what we're getting through today. How is that looking for you?
Well, we haven't, apart from organising some of our committee to form a fundraising committee, we haven't addressed that as such yet. Having said that, the Timaru complex, they've spent 850,000. We believe we're getting something better for a lot less, and they did get $250,000 from Mid-South Canterbury Trust. So there are funding options available. The service clubs will make a commitment to a certain amount of it. I think there's enough community need and want for this product that we should be able to get it through. I appreciate that a lot of the service clubs have dwindling membership and older membership, but hey, if this is going to be our last hurrah, let's make it a good one, eh?
I'm sure it won't be the last. Councillor Todd.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can talk to the funding if you wish.
Yep, okay.
We do have a first lot of funding into Advanced Ashburton, which is to cover the first part of the project for the detailed design and looking after the funding for Botanic and Lucas Haynes to oversee the project. Then obviously once we know the costings for the project, it's our intention to apply to the Lion Foundation, Mid-South Canterbury Trust, and also the likes of lotteries as well. So we're confident that by time of, and also Lions clubs, so we're confident that once we've been through those areas that funding will be available.
Great. No further questions, councillors? Councillor McMillan?
If there's no further questions, I'd like to
might
move
have
the
one more.
recommendation.
I was going to move it, but I'll second it if that's okay with the Mayor.
Okay, there's no further questions. Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, well,
I'll just add one thing. We need to be aware, and I haven't expressed it properly, that half the town's children cross the railway line for college and schools, etc. So it's actually a bigger thing than you think.
yeah, you're correct. And we had the Kiwi Railway here a couple of Fridays ago to open up the freight hub up at just out of Ashburton, and they've been made aware of this through a council meeting, and they are positive to help with a rail something, sleepers or track or something which they will have. So they're on board with it too, to make it, to teach the children or whoever how to safely go across railway lines. Yep. So thank you, gentlemen. That's good. We've got the report there. Councillor McMillan moved.
Yes, I'll move, and I just wanted to speak
And
to.
we've seconded Councillor Cameron. You speak to the motion.
Yes, thank you. So I've been involved with this group along with Councillor Todd, and this idea initially came from a submission to the walking and cycling strategy by Safe Communities, and it's been a great group to be part of. Everyone's very enthusiastic. The concept plan that we saw, not a lot has changed because we were so pleased with the whole idea, and it sort of did capture everything that we'd requested, and we've talked a lot about the railway crossings, etc., and just having all that available to the kids and to migrants, some of the former refugees who may use this as sort of learning road rules, etc. We've had some great input, and it's wonderful to be able to bring this now to council to hopefully get the approval.
Thank you. Further speakers for or against the motion? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I speak for. It's very pleasing to see this hopefully go ahead in the domain. I'm also pleased to see that it's funded through the community's donations and generosity rather than just pushed back onto the poorer ratepayer.
Further speakers for or against? If not, right to reply, or right to reply? I'll put the motion. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is on page 28, Canterbury Climate Partnership Plans Actions. It is item number 9, but on my records anyway, it's actually item number 7. So let's change that to number 7. Welcome, gentlemen. And anything further to add?
I did have, there was a statement in the report that acknowledged there were some questions raised in the workshop that we were seeking more information on. I have some more information on those, which I'm happy to share if people want to receive it now.
Yes, please.
The first related to an observation that some work on council carbon inventories at a regional level appeared to have gone nowhere, and talking with the staff at the Mayoral Forum Secretariat, they confirmed this sits with the corporate forum, and there has been limited to no progress to date. It's their suggestion that this work should actually sit with the Climate Change Working Group, and the proposed actions in the partnership plan would give that group a mandate to do some work on it. Our current understanding is that some councils, including Ashburton District, have this well in hand, but others are falling behind, and in time it makes sense for all councils to complete their own organisational carbon inventories. And the second point I recollect was raised by Councillor Hooper, and it was in relation to the idea of the It's Time Canterbury campaign. It's acknowledged that the initiative has not enjoyed the profile and impact that people expected it would, and there are pieces of work in hand to work on that. The Canterbury Comms team at ECAN are suggesting a workshop this year with relevant council staff, including the Climate Change Working Group, to develop a strategy for the campaign, to develop it into a comprehensive resource hub. I can also add that I'm aware of at least 2 other councils who have shared some reservations about the effectiveness to date of It's Time Canterbury. So that was the additional information. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Richard. Councillors, questions? There being no questions, we have a recommendation there. If someone would like to move and read it. Another recommendation, just move it. Councillor Ellis, you're moving.
Happy to move, Mr. Mayor.
Second that. Councillor Cameron. Speak to the motion at all. Councillor Ellis. Thank you, gentlemen.
Can I say something to the
Yes.
motion? I'm interested in Ashburton climate action priorities, sustainable transportation, and to invest in public transport. I just want to highlight that because we will, I presume, have a report coming to council at some stage looking at public transportation and whether it's a viable option or welcome in our community or otherwise. That Safer Ashburton's done, so that's just a point that I'd highlighted in the report.
Yeah, that report should be, that survey that was done should be feeding through somewhere to us at some stage soon, because it has been completed, as I understand. Councillor Wilson?
I do support it, but I feel aggrieved of the funding mechanism where it's our district ratepayers and people in Mid-Canterbury are paying a very large proportion of the amount of it compared to maybe Christchurch City on a per head population basis, and also some of the narrative around promoting native plantings and encouraging regenerative agriculture, when we all know that agriculture in our districts through good science and advanced technology will beat climate change rather than just planting more bushes and going regenerative.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, and can I follow up on your comment, Mr Mayor, that it's coming to council? Do we have a date for that yet? I'm asking you, not, yeah.
No, I don't think we do, but we will follow up on that.
And also, can I make another comment? Key barriers to climate change in our district, and how do we overcome them? The key barriers. One of them was
What
limited.
number are you on there?
I'm on page 49. One of them was limited public understanding, misinformation, knowledge gaps, and unconscious bias hinder public engagement in climate action. Are we involved in some education activity? Would that be a useful way to deal with that if we see that as a genuine barrier? Question to the Mayor. Or
Well, the Mayor's not going to answer a question, it's in debate mode, so.
yeah, that's my feedback to the group.
Yeah. Thank you for your comment. No further speakers for or against? No right of reply not needed. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Next item is amalgamation of water reserves. Page 53. Welcome, Leanne Erin. Anything further to add to the report?
Nothing further to add. This is really just a finalisation of a process that's been going over the last few years.
Questions, councillors? I just have one. It's in the exclusions in Montalto and Bar Hill. Where does Lyndhurst fit?
So Lyndhurst doesn't currently have a reserve balance at all, so that won't be included in this report.
Bar Hill would be similar.
Bar Hill has a minimal reserve balance, which we are looking into at this moment.
Lyndhurst and Bar Hill are the same schemes, connected.
No, they're two separate schemes. There's different loans on both schemes. It's not actually a cost centre that should have a reserve, so that's why we're looking into that.
The way I understand it, Lyndhurst is, it's a loan to Lyndhurst and it's a loan to Bar Hill. They're all connected, the same well, the same pumps feed the same schemes, but that's called differently.
There are two different loans, though, because they were taken up at different parts of time.
So do we need the words Lyndhurst in here as well to be excluded?
The reason it's not here is because they don't actually have a reserve balance.
Okay, happy to leave it there if it doesn't come back later. And those loans must be getting close to being extinguished too, I would think.
I can tell you that Bar Hill's loan's doesn't end until 38, 39. So that was a 25-year loan on that scheme.
And Lyndhurst, when's it expire?
I haven't got that detail with me at this moment.
Yep. Questions, councillors? Recommendation there. Someone like to move that the council amalgamates the 11 drinking water reserves into one group water supply reserve to be used only for the drinking water activity. Councillor Cameron, Councillor Todd. Thank you, ladies. Open for debate. Councillor Wilson.
Yep, I support this change or this putting together reserve balances. It does show that the strength of all being together is good for some of the smaller communities, and they've got good drinking water without facing the financial burden of not being able to afford it.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Also support the motion. It just does tidy up from when we brought all these groups together at the time. Now all the reserves are also shared, so yeah, I think it's a good idea.
No further speakers for or against? I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Over to page 59. Dog control fees and charges for the 1st of July 24 to 30th of June 25. Welcome, Jane. Rick, anything further to add to your report?
Thank you. Through the chair, we previously found that the revenue from the dog registrations was tracking below the 85-95% set in our revenue and finance policy. And it was therefore proposed to introduce a graduated increase in fees of 7% per annum. And so the attached fees to the report reflect that increase.
So when will it reach that 85-90% target under the proposal?
Thank you. Through the chair, we envisage a 5-year increase to get to the full 85-95%.
Do you know what it's sitting at now?
72%.
Right, thank you. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Through the chair, having the new, what do you call them, the new metal tags, is that proving more cost effective?
Thank you. Through the chair, certainly very much cost effective. The ongoing costs that we used to incur per annum was around 6,000 for all the tags. So we've now passed that initial payout, and so yes, very much cost effective.
Councillor Cameron.
Just a thought, with the universal 7% fee increase, has there been any thinking to making the people that are compliant with regards to dog registrations maintain the same fee, and the non-compliant dog registration aspects, or the menacing dogs, or the dangerous dogs, or the pounding, go up to take that 72% up to the 85% in the revenue and financing policy?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's actually a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah.
In terms of menacing dogs, for example, there's very, very few.
Okay.
In fact, I suspect there's probably only half a dozen.
Right.
So the bulk of them are the responsible dog owners anyway. Some councils just charge a flat fee whether you've got a dog that's good, bad, neutered, not neutered, and everything else. And I must admit, there's a certain attraction in that because it would be just so much easier to predict your income and to do your billing. But from an education point of view, I don't think it sends the right message. There's no incentive there for people to be responsible dog owners, which is why we've stuck with what we've got.
Thank you. I didn't realise there were so few menacing dogs, and yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
With respect to the level of compliance with paying fees, do you think that the increased price, because obviously it becomes a price point where you charge too much and some people just can't pay or won't pay, do you think we're getting to that point, or how does compliance, we've obviously been putting it up for the last few years, has it been reducing or increasing or staying the same?
Thank you. Through the chair, the level of compliance regards registration has increased quite encouragingly over recent years. We're currently around 98, just over registered.
98%.
Yeah, 98%. In previous years, we would be looking at 500 to 600 dogs unregistered and chasing those for various enforcement ways, late fees and so on. We're not seeing that now. There is a small handful which we deal purely from an enforcement point of view. We get to a point, they've had the chance of late fees and so on, and they're now enforcement dealt by way of an infringement notice. That's just a very small handful now. So the increase, yes, 7%, but we don't see that as a dramatic increase in terms of from previous years. So we're hoping that will be accepted across the board.
I think just further to the question that was asked, the one area where you do notice it is the impounding fees. That's where they'll walk away and say they don't want the dog, and then we've got to try and rehome it, or if we can't rehome it, we have to pay for it to be euthanised. So that's one that we need to watch.
A responsible dog owner, Urban, what do you have to do to be one of them?
Thank you for the chair. So, responsible dog owners are subjected to a site inspection, and there are various requirements to meet that, and it comes down to the control of the dog on the premise. For instance, not where anyone walking onto the premise is not faced by a dog. The dog's contained elsewhere. Lockable gates, secure fencing, and so on.
And it's set at $64, which is below the 70, because everyone could possibly apply for that, could they? As long as they met the criteria.
Well, yes, if they meet the criteria, but not everybody has got dog-free access to the front door. So that does bump a few people out.
Right. And disability assist dogs are free. Is that the goodness of our hearts, or is that a government?
I'm pretty sure that's legislation,
Legislation,
isn't it?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Councillor Todd.
Thank you. If you have, say, 400 dogs unregistered, how do you know you've got 400 dogs unregistered? I just wondered.
Thank you for the chair. I should clarify that this is the known dogs
Okay.
that are then
There's
on
also unknown, unregistered dogs,
Yes,
which is a hot topic
s-
with the mayor.
a separate entity.
Well, they don't get registered from the previous year, so they know they're not doing what they should, yeah. Any further questions, councillors? No, thank you. Recommendation there that council adopts the dog registration and control fees and charges for 24-25 as set out in Appendix 1, and that the dog registration and control fees and charges for 24-25 are publicly notified. Mover, Councillor Todd, Councillor Ellis. Open for debate. Being none, put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Next item is naming of roads, number 10 on page 64. Ian and Jane. Anything further to add to your report there, Ian? Nothing further. Questions, councillors? We'll move into the recommendation that the private right-of-way to be developed as part of stage 3 of subdivision within the subdivision known as McCain Future Investments Limited, located at Trevors Road, be named Temple Lane. So
I'll move that.
Seconder. Councillor Ellis. You speak the motion. Any speakers for or against? Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Next item is number 11, page 69, naming of roads, West Town developments. Anything further to add, Ian? Nothing further to add. I just have a question time. I just have one. The road itself, is it on the map on page 72? Is it the road that goes through the subdivision?
Yes, it is. Yes.
It says stage 1 and stage 2, but it all gets the same name? Yep. Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, through the chair. How do you decide whether it's called a street or a lane or a way? Is it up to the developer to choose that?
Through the chair, there's actually a naming standard, Australia and New Zealand naming standard that we operate, and there are various parameters around what you can use and in what circumstances you can use various names. For example, the previous report with lane, if it's a private right of way, it has to be called a lane. But yeah.
No further questions? There's a recommendation there that the roads to Veston Council as part of subdivision within the subdivision known as West Town Belt Developments located on West Town Belt and Rakaia be named K Way. Mover? Councillor Todd, Councillor Cameron. Further debate? Any debate? Put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Next item is number 12, the financial reports. Erin, Leanne. We'll go through them page by page, starting on page 76 and 77. Just stop me when you want to question. 78, 79, 80, 81,
It's page 79, Mr Mayor.
79, yep.
I note that some of the capital and operating expenditures are under, but can you explain to me with respect to the shingle roads where we're at there, if we're under or over with respect to roading? Can we go down that far, or is it too far in?
Just to clarify, through you, Mr Mayor, are you referring to the amount of shingle on the unsealed roads?
Expenditure versus what we've done effectively, because if we're talking footpaths, we talk metres, and we've had to go over to do the metres we've done and some of that sort of thing.
We're on track to fully spend the subsidised work programme on the transport network by the end of the financial year.
I'm on the same page under footpaths and just wondering what was the overspend that was related to the Barring Square East upgrade? Is that the footpath along the side of along Cameron Street? Or would anyone know that?
Someone should.
I'm sorry, we'll take a note of that and give you an accurate response following this meeting. I just don't have that off the top of my head.
Just report back on that, thank you. Page 82, 83, that Ashburton wastewater, going over the respective budgets, but you are reviewing that expenditure, which is good to see. Page 84, 85,
Just on,
Councillor Todd.
That's okay. Just on 83 wastewater, it just talks about the delay associated with securing council approval. Was that because of our delay here, or where was the delay actually? It's just the third line down.
Yeah, it was raised at the last financial variance reports. I thought it was going to be changed.
Okay.
It's not council's delay, the cause. Page 84, 85. Or
I'm just going to confirm we'll make a note of that too and get that accurate.
85, 86. 87, 88. There's going to be an unfavourable variance in stock water, an ageing network that's has monies need spending on it when not budgeted because it's an ageing network. Councillor Cameron?
Page 89, I'm just waiting for the next section. Are we on to that after stop water?
Yep, 89.
There's a reason for variance of, is that $2 million in the EA, is that recreation facilities and services, is that EA networks primarily, or what is that recreation for services and facilities?
Yes, it is.
Is there any, and that's, can someone just explain to me how that happened? That's, we're 400,000 down, but how does that come to a $2 million variance?
Well, it's a combination of things, and as we provide to the Audit and Risk Committee that very detailed report on the EA Networks centre operation, it's made up of a whole range of things. We have acknowledged that budget error for
I've seen it last time.
for many months now. Yes, it's also true that other revenue is light at the EA Network Centre.
What does other revenue mean, like meeting hire and stuff, or what is other?
No. People coming in to use the facility.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's made up of a whole host of unders and overs, which is expressed in more detail to the Audit and Risk Committee next week.
Because when we see the detail, it looks like the usage is increased. So in my mind, I mean, I know this has come up before, I know that, but in my mind, the people going through the doors, and we hear about the capacity of the stadium and things, the use is increased. So I don't understand how the money is less, you know.
Because they're not the same thing. So
No.
usage kind of increased from last year.
Mhm.
So that would explain an increase, but it may be less than we budgeted.
Well, presumably it is.
That's right. So they're
Significantly
quite
less,
compatible. That increased
Yeah.
usage is still not meeting.
So we need to have
budget.
a good revisit at the audit and risk about the budgeting process.
That's the forum for that more detailed conversation.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
You also note the other side of that equation is the expenditure, which is also down to correspond with the lack of income too. So I think we could be assured that staff are doing all they can to balance the budget.
No doubt.
Page 90, 91. '92, '93.
The elderly person's housing, I understand that, so the ones that are being unable to be re-tenanted, are they ones we're going to demolish, or is that 90 days before we can re-tenant them? Is there something happening there, or we just...
Through the chair, sorry. There's a number that are untenanted because we are going through the stage of demolishing, and that's, I think we've got 7 and about to make 8 of them empty. There's always a gap between having to, when some of our longer term tenants in particular leave, and then having to do the work we have to do before we can re-tenant them. But the majority of this is around Friendship Lane itself.
Councillor Ellis?
Page 93, reserve boards. Which is the Rakaia South camping ground, water treatment and changing rooms? Where's Rakaia South?
Tony, you can answer that.
Thank you. Through the chair, we've got a classic case of a cut and paste error here. We need to remove those 3 words, South Camping Ground, from that phrase. What's in reference to is it's the Rakaia water treatment and changing rooms at the swimming pool of 72,000. So we'll get that squared away for next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Page 94, 95. 96, 97. 98, 99. Just a question on the parks and open spaces, the unbudgeted capital expenditure. Is that bringing that forward from a previous, going forward year?
You going?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes it is. So it was in, the need grew to the point that the berm had to be added and is currently already being used. And I'm assured by the Open Spaces Manager that we're now providing for regular extensions of cemetery berms through the long-term plan that's now in front of you. So it was necessary, but not completely anticipated at the time the budget was set.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron?
What page are you on, Neil?
98?
No, I'm on 101. Shall I turn on?
Yes. Councillor Wilson?
With respect to Parks and Recreation, staff training with regards to temporary management, traffic management, do we do that in-house, or are we, because that's a growing industry as it was, do we try and keep that cost to a minimum?
We do certainly try and keep the cost to a minimum, but we don't have the capability of running the traffic management planning courses in-house. We have somewhat informally considered whether or not that would be a useful thing to do, particularly with other well-known contractors or whatever in the Ashburton district, and whether we should join up and do that ourselves to further reduce costs, but that hasn't currently been fully developed into a proposal, so we're conscious of it, but no, that is externally provided at the moment.
Councillor Cameron?
No, page 101. Anybody before me?
100, 101.
Just compliance and development income and expenditure report, please. I know, I understand the building regulations variance and I understand the temporary variances and resource consents and planning. I don't understand the environmental health variance. I understood environmental health was looking at hairdressing salons from home and workplaces and coffee shops and things. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's predominantly food premises, and I'm happy to report that next time this will say that it's not a permanent variance. Because $85,000 of income was coded to the wrong cost centre. That's now been tracked down and will be journalled in the near future. So in fact, the unfavourable variance is more like 38,000, not 123,000.
Thank you, because I couldn't understand that because I assume most of that is a fixed sort of cost. So I couldn't follow how that would happen, but thank you, Jane, that's helpful.
102, 103. 104, 105. 106, 107. Councillor Cameron.
Just loan repayments, that's not a permanent variance. Are we just waiting for the time to pay that back? That gets paid back at a particular stage in the year?
Through the Mayor, yes, that is something that happens at the end of the year. We do some adjustments through the accounts for those.
Thank you.
$108, $109. 110, 111. It's at the end. So we will have a mover and a seconder that we receive the 2024 financial reports. Councillor Cameron, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, ladies. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried, thank you. Item number 13, news report. Questions on that? And there's one alteration or mistake in that news report. The Lauriston Solar Farm went to that sod turning. It's not 90 megawatts of clean renewable energy, it's 63 on that site out there, which we delivered. And attending the sod turning was a great feat to be there, to see it progressing. And Genesis Energy has extended an invitation for us to go and visit the site once they're into the installation of the whole panels. Oh, we've got a date already, have we? Oh, nice. Yep, so that'd be good to go out there. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Just a question asking you for an update on your meeting with the Minister of Transport.
Yeah, we had a good meeting with the Minister the day the freight hub was being opened at the northeast. And I might refer to Hamish to just give you an update.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, we met with the Minister of Transport and did canvass funding of the second urban bridge. And he made it clear that he expects the National Land Transport Program to fund the needs of the network, and that fund and that process needs to be where we look to for the funding of the bridge. He offered the assistance of Whakatahi staff, largely based in Wellington, to connect with us very, very shortly to further conversations around innovative funding mechanisms within the parameters of the National Land Transport Program. He acknowledges the size of the project and the repayment issues or the funding issues, but he is adamant that it needs to sit inside the National Land Transport Program. So we now look forward to working with those officials to see how that might flow and where that might end up. And indeed, the Mayor and I were in a car on Monday and we did speak to James Cagle at Waka Kotahi about actively getting on with those conversations with their funding people from largely from Wellington.
Good summary of the meeting. Yep. Councillor Cameron?
Just a quick follow on from that, if I may, that topic. I think I recall correctly, the national government said that they would hopefully get onto our urban bridge in the first term of government. Is that still in their first term? Is that still on the cards? That's still their.
It is still their goal.
expectation?
It still is their goal, and the local MP James Meager is also pushing for that.
Thank you.
Councillor McMillan?
Just another question. Did you get a chance to talk to him about the speed, namely that letter that was sent asking about the speed, reducing the speed out of Methven and through Rakaia?
No, I don't think we did.
I know you were pressed for time, but...
Yeah, no, we were very pressed for time, and while we had programmed a meeting with the Minister to follow the opening of the Fairfield Freight Hub, in the end, because a key guest was running a little bit late, we actually met with the Minister prior to the opening, so that was a great opportunity, but it further compressed the time we had, and the only issue we were able to canvass was the funding of the second urban bridge.
Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. Excuse the pun, but it sounds like there's a lot of water to pass under this bridge before it happens now, because as it stands today, are they saying they'll fund 51%, and at this stage, if we can't outsource other funding, we'll have to find the rest of the money?
That's one interpretation and not an unreasonable one, but I think what he is also saying is he acknowledges the business case suggested that the 51% subsidy rate wasn't necessarily the correct subsidy rate for that project. He has acknowledged the reasons for the second bridge, which is to relieve congestion and to improve safety and resilience on the state highway network. And he was perfectly accepting that the subsidy rate needed to reflect that improvement for the state highway network. So we took from that that a subsidy rate ahead of our normal FAR rate was entirely justified. The Stantec business case suggested that could be as high as 62%, but that is still part of the discussion. How we fund between 62% and 100% is where the conversations with officials needs to continue.
He also talked about alternative funding methods, and his government is looking at doing that, and you see the taking excise tax off fuel and charging through road user charges. So they're looking at different ways of funding roading going forward. So what they are, we don't know. They'll be working on that, and they may apply to us at a later date. But they're still developing those other ways of funding, so they say.
That's correct. And one of the specific ones that the Minister referred to was a review of the tolling provisions in New Zealand. So and in fact, I seem to recall they had already signalled that they did wish to review the way in which tolls can and cannot be applied to roading infrastructure in New Zealand. So he just reiterated that it is certainly his intention to review the way in which tolling is a mechanism for funding projects a little bit later in the year.
Councillor Cameron?
Can I change topic?
Yep, in Mayor's report.
Oh, great. I see that you went to ECAN and presented our submission to ECAN for their long-term plan. And in our submission, I recall we had some actions that they, if they were going to rate us for activities, they need to undertake the activities and give us feedback when they're done. How did that go down?
That was yesterday.
Yeah.
And went down well. I presented the submission to ECAN and said we want feedback on particular items, and explained that explicitly to them. Mm-hmm. That not a standard letter is not suitable. We need direct answers to our submission.
And they nodded and said yes?
They always nod, yes.
Thank you.
No, it was well received though.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Back to the,
Councillor Todd, sorry.
back to the bridge again. before my time and everyone else's time, probably did the council agree to fund about 10% of the cost of the original bridge?
We never.
Is that where that fits in?
Yeah, we never set a percentage. We have had in our long-term plan for the last whatever years, $7.5 million
Yeah.
to fund towards the bridge.
Yeah.
And you could imply that was a percentage, but it was a dollar figure. You can't put a percentage in a long-term plan, you need a dollar figure.
Okay.
So we've had $7.5 million in there for, is it 3 years or 6 years, whichever one it is, and we've still got that same $7.5 million in our draft annual long-term plan we have at the moment. So that's what we've got in, and that's what we're working with at the moment until we get advised differently from, it'll be the Minister of Transport will be, I suppose. Yeah.
Certainly the inclusion of the project in the long-term plan is causing us internally to think pretty carefully. But the bottom line is, in order for a project to be included in the National Land Transport Plan, i.e. get any funding at all, it has to be included in the council's long-term plan. So we have to have the project in some way or other in our long-term plan. We felt the best thing to do was to continue to express that project in the same way as we had previously included it, i.e. At $7.5 million, which was the previous amount that council had agreed with the community that we would contribute. Of course, in the meantime, the cost of the bridge is significantly higher. The government has changed. The message from the minister is really clear that the National Land Transport Program has to fund the network, where the previous government had been topping up projects outside of the National Land Transport Program. That's not this government's intention. So there is a lot of moving parts to this project, and the LTP and the LTP process, and indeed the timing of the LTP, and particularly the discussions with the community, is completely out of sync with confirmation of the next iteration of the National Land Transport Program. So we will have to adopt our LTP before we know what that National Land Transport Program is. So all of that makes a very messy picture for this project in our formal plans and budgets and documents. Having said that, 3 years ago it was also reasonably messy because at that point there had been no commitment to the project at all from Ministry of Transport, and we still wanted to include it in our plan, and the Audit Office had a view of that 3 years ago, but we felt the right thing to do was to include it in our document because of how important the project is to our community. So this time round we are doing the same thing, including it in the plan because we must. We don't have a different number to include. Anything else would be as much a guesstimate as any other number anyone can think of. So we've left it at $7.5 million. But we do note internally that the bridge is now programmed to cost $130 million. And our share at $7.5 may or may not survive the whole funding process and discussion. So there's a lot going on in the space that's incredibly uncertain.
If you'll see, on 18th of April, I attended the Canterbury Regional Transport meeting, as I'm a member of it, as all the other mayors of Canterbury are. That's where we adopted our Regional Land Transport Plan for Canterbury, which feeds into the National Land Transport Plan for New Zealand now. So that's on its way north, and in there, this project, the Ashburton Bridge, is the #1 project for the spend for the next 3 years in that plan is the Ashburton Bridge. So that's a very good sign. It's right at the top for Canterbury. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. The LTP community engagements, I see you had your last one on the 17th of April, we did, but I see we've had over 1,500 submissions to that, which is incredible. It's going to be a lot of reading, but that's not the final total yet. There are quite a few coming through via.
I'm not sure the final total. Tony might know.
Shows
We
all
also
those
have-
all the meetings and the consultations that we did over that month were worth it.
I think we'll get the answer from Tony, but I think that media campaign we did on it has been highly successful. A lot of engagement, and that means they come into us as submissions as well. And I think it's about 100 people wish to be heard, which will take up our time and hearing and listening to them, and also reading all the documents. But that is our job. So which a good success rate there, Tony.
Thank you. Through the chair, just to confirm, we've had 1,525 submissions received. We've got a small number of people that have submitted twice, either accidentally forgetting they'd submitted or answering a question that later on that they'd skipped. So we do expect that final tally might drop closer to about the 1,500 mark once we get them all merged in under the name. But we've managed to keep up with them as we've gone through, so the numbers are fairly tight.
It's about 3 times last time, I think.
It is. Last time we had about 420 submissions. Our biggest ever LTP was back in 2009, and I think we had about 2,200.
I wonder what the topic was then.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. We were really pleased with the engagement process this time, and the many informal and engagement opportunities. The other thing that drives the community to express their view, of course, is the actual issues at hand. So I think this time round we would like to think that our process contributed, but we would also need to acknowledge that there were some questions in there that were divided views in the community, and that will generate community response as well.
I just think it might have been EA Networks Centre, the stadium pool was.
Yes, it was, Mr. Mayor.
It was that, yeah, which took a lot of community interest there. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I see you met with the police. Anything highlighted for our district at all with that meeting?
No, they're doing good work. They're keeping on top of what's out there. Obviously, it's not all roses. Talked about what happens in this building, and they're aware and working as hard as they can to keep people safe and keep Ashburton a safe place. We're going to have Senior Sergeant coming to Council within the next couple of months to speak in front of you, so an opportunity there to ask questions. We're just scheduling that at the moment.
Could I just to add one further comment to that, I think one of the really pleasing aspects to that meeting was it was really clear to the Mayor and I that we have a strong relationship with the police, both locally and at a district level, and the things that they want are the same things as we want, are the same things as the community wants, and so that partnership is important and appears strong, and will only be stronger because of sessions like the one we recently held.
And they value the community's input because the community is their intel, and they can't do their job without the community giving them information. So they value that information that comes from the community. It's it's a partnership. Anything further? The Mayor's report, Councillor McMillan.
Nothing further, so
I'll move if you're happy to second.
Yeah, I'll second.
Any further? I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. So that takes us on to just about 2:15, which we have our guests in from Transwaste Canterbury. I see them at the back of the room. Welcome, Gil, if you'd like to come forward and with your guests and introduce them. And you have a PowerPoint which will help you set up if it's not already in.
Thanks, Mayor Neil.
So welcome, Gil, and you're the chair of Transwaste Canterbury. And you have two gentlemen with you, so I'll ask you to introduce them to us, please.
Thanks, Mayor. First on my left is Hayden. Hayden's the landfill manager, so we thought it was useful to bring him along in case you've got, and I'm sure you will have, hope you will have, questions that delve a bit more into the landfill operations, etc. So Hayden's there on my left, and on my right, Jeremy Parker, and Jeremy is Commercial Manager for Transwaste, so looking after the more commercial transactions. One thing I should say right at the start is what you're seeing is the total staff of Transwaste. Transwaste, in fact, has no staff. They're all contracted people. Jeremy's contracted, and Hayden's employment is with Waste Management New Zealand Limited. I'll come to that in a moment. We've got a presentation for you, but look, let me just say at the start, first time I've been in this building. Wow, it's fantastic. And congratulations on, an amenity like this. This is great. The council room I normally see is, and don't pass this on, is Christchurch City, and this is so much nicer to be in this one.
You are being live streamed, however, Gil.
Okay,
so any secrets you're sharing have gone into the World Wide Web.
And, congratulations on that. Also, Liz, look, glad you're here. You probably sat through most of this presentation before, and feel free to ask questions, feel free to point us in directions that you think your colleagues might be interested in. As we go through the presentation, just ask questions as we go.
Great, thanks.
And if that diverts us a little bit, so be it. We're conscious that it's being live streamed, we're conscious that it's therefore public. There'll be some areas that we probably won't go into in as much detail, but we'll be as open as we feel we can.
Thank you.
Right, here we go. So what we're talking about is a thing now called the Cape Valley Landfill and Gareth James Energy Park. A slight name change, but that's to recognise the contribution that Gareth James, who I think many of you will know, he was the district engineer at Waimakariri District in the 1990s, and it was him who conceived of the idea of a regional landfill and convinced the other councils to join with them so that we had one world-class facility. Gareth has also been a huge proponent over the years of developing the energy aspect. As the landfill's developed, and we'll talk about that quite a bit, the energy side has developed. So we've recognised Gareth. He's retired from, he became the South Island manager for Waste Management. He retired, and at that stage, or just after that, we've recognised it by calling it now the Cape Valley Landfill and Gareth James Energy Park. Part of the reason for that, and I'll talk about it a lot today, is most people see a landfill where their waste goes and it's gone. We see a landfill now as something that takes people's waste and we extract as much value as we can from it before the waste is gone. So just that concept of extracting value from what other people call waste now is a big driver for what we do. Just a view of the facilities pad where the containers that come from each of the transfer stations, including Ashburton, go and are placed while they're full before the 8-wheel drive trucks come in and take them down to actually empty on the face of the landfill. I'll come back to that because that's something that makes this landfill unique. I'm going to talk about today, I'm not going to run through them, but there's those things there. Some of them we'll skip through pretty quickly. By the way, Mayor Neil, how long have we got?
How long's a piece of string? But we've got till about 10 to 3. So you've got a good 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
30 minutes, that's fine, because I could go on all day.
Yeah.
For those of you that haven't been intimately involved, thought it might be worth just putting this slide up there to get you a sense of where the ownership sits, where Ashburton District Council sits in that, and how that ownership is corralled, if you like, through to Transwaste and the role of Waste Management New Zealand. So it's a true public-private partnership. The private ownership is 50% Waste Management New Zealand. The public ownership is 50% spread over the 5 councils in Canterbury that agreed to go ahead together. And that's Christchurch City, Waimakariri District, Selwyn District, Ashburton District and Huranui District. Those councils' ownership, for all intents and purposes, is corralled, if I can call it that, through an entity or through a committee called the Canterbury Regional Landfill Committee. I think it's actually got the word joint in there somewhere as well, but it's a Canterbury Regional Landfill Committee. So when Transwaste reports in terms of accountability to its council shareholders, it reports to the Regional Landfill Committee. Liz is on that, and I assume that she reports the good and the bad back to you guys. So the entity then is Transwaste, owned as we've just talked about, and a unique feature of it is the private sector ownership is Waste Management New Zealand, and our major contractor is in fact Waste Management. Inherently, people say, gee, that looks like a conflict. We manage that through various agreements and a whole lot of external auditing, probity auditing, etc. that goes on. And it has worked very successfully since 2005, and prior to that, while development was going on. So that's the structure of the ownership and the operations. Just, you might find this of interest, in 2005-06, the shareholding was roughly worked out in terms of the population area in those days, but it also relatively closely reflected where the waste was coming from, the council shareholding. So if you look at that now, you'll see the difference in terms of where the waste was coming from in 2005-06 to where it's coming from in 22-23. And what you'll see, and it won't surprise you, is a reduction in Christchurch and an increase in the contribution of others, except in that case it was Waimakariri, and I can't really explain why. But you'll see that Selwyn has significantly increased, Ashburton's increased, and that's relative to the flow from the growth in population of each of those areas and the growth in industry in each of those areas as well. Just so that the last slide to orient you a little bit.
Just have one question, Gil.
Sorry.
Thank you. Just back to the last slide. Is Christchurch's garden waste going into that 84%?
No.
So would that contribute to a little bit of the reduction because Christchurch's population's increased as well?
Yeah, possibly, but the garden waste essentially is going to Living Earth as an alternate.
Yeah. So I just wonder why, because their population's increased presumably as well. So their rubbish has declined. I'm trying to think why that would be.
I think it's around the proportions. So, for example, Selwyn District Council's obviously had that substantial growth. So proportionally, they've increased.
Thank you. Cheers.
Just while we're on that, one thing that occurs to me that you might be interested in, I was going to ask you a question, it's not a quiz, so I won't. When people think of waste, they think of what they put out in their bins. That's what they think about. The percentage of, the proportion of the total waste that bin waste makes up, that's going into the landfill, is about 18 to 20%. It's low. If you ask most people, they'll go, oh, it's 40%, 50%, whatever. But it's very low. Where does the bulk of the waste come from? Commercial activity. And whether that be construction or just commercial industrial operations. So you can see that changes the focus once you start to think about that. That's where our focus has got to be in handling that waste. The other thing that I thought you might find of interest is the land area. The area that's outlined in the orange lines, including a little bit in the far top left-hand corner, is land that is owned by Transwaste. So we own about 1,300 hectares. The landfill itself, and you can see it in the middle of the picture there as those little white bits, is 37 hectares out of 1,300 odd. 400, just over 400 hectares is in those yellow areas, and that's the Turimoana Bush Conservation Area. So that's a QE2 covenanted area for conservation purposes. We can talk about that a bit later on if you want to. The rest of the land is held for buffering purposes, if you like, but it's a lot of it is in commercial forest. And that commercial plantation forest will be used in the long run as it's harvested to provide for aftercare when the landfill shuts. But that gives you an idea of the sort of land holding we've got. And Liz, I think you've been there a few times. It's pretty magnificent when you get there. Most people don't, it's a part of Canterbury that most people don't even know about.
Can I just ask the question? Sorry, that I didn't realise you owned the top bit by the Waipara River. So what do you use that for?
A very specific reason for that. Where imagine it's the date that's up there. on the top left-hand corner is where the turnoff is to the Lewis Pass and the State Highway 1 going through to Kaikoura. Our road comes along the top edge of that orange piece, and we have kept that because it's a shingle resource. We use a lot of shingle. At the moment, we source that shingle out of largely, I guess, the
local contractors.
Yeah, and local contractors, and they take it out of the riverbeds. Should that not be allowed in the future, and that's possible, we've got our own resource we can start using to save us having to buy it in and transport it long distances. So that's why that piece has always been kept. All right, just to give you some sort of numbers, both quantities and financial, for the year ended June 23. So these are our published financial results for the year ended June 23. Near enough 360,000 tonnes of waste went into the landfill, and that including the waste levy, which at that stage was at $50 a tonne? $30 a tonne. That contributed 63 million of revenue. If you took the levy out, just over 52 million tonnes, a net profit after tax of 15.6 million, an indication of the strength of the company shareholders' funds to total assets, and dividends paid in that year of 18.3. That was a little bit unusual in that year, the 18.3 million, because during that year there was a change in the ownership of our private sector waste management, private sector owner, Waste Management New Zealand, and we took the opportunity to clear out tax imputation credits so that we didn't lose them with the ownership change. So there was a higher than normal dividend in that year. But interestingly, since the inception of the landfill and started operations in 2005, we've paid 200 million out in dividends. The total investment of the owners at that date was $16 million. So they have a pretty good return on their investment over the years. In addition to that, we've made payments to the Cape Valley Community Trust, which is located as a trust that's focused on the Waipara-Omahi school area, being the host area for the landfill. We've made contributions to them of $1.5 million, and that was part of the consenting requirement. We offered it in the consenting process. For the 6 months ended December, and I won't go through this in detail, but you'll see the 6 months ended December, the tonnes, again, pretty static between 22 and 23, slight increases. Sales revenue, again, excluding the levy, pretty much a slight price increase during that period, net profit staying about the same, etc. The company at this stage has got no external debt. Our draft statement of intent, we've submitted as we were required to. That goes through to each of the ownership councils and to Waste Management New Zealand. You can make, I think you corral your views on that through the Joint Landfill Committee and feed those back to us by the end of May, and then we complete our final statement of intent during June. We have not yet done our budget for 24-25. We are in the process of finalising that at the moment, and that will be included in the final statement of intent.
Gil, just think about the dollars that you collect, back to a couple of slides, and you exclude the levy, and you're sending 185,000 tonnes or get delivered. It has a levy, is it $50 a tonne?
It's currently now 50. It will
yep.
go to 60 on the 1st of July.
So just on that 185,000 tonnes, the $50 is 9.2 million.
Yep.
What happens to that levy, do you know?
You might know. It goes to Ministry for Environment, and as I understand it, 50% of the total levies in New Zealand are available for local government to use for initiatives, I assume waste initiatives, and 50% of it is held by central government for central initiatives. They run a fund which I guess people can apply to, organisations can apply to. So that's about as far as I know. Do you guys know any more?
My understanding is that the fund is restricted to waste minimisation.
Oh, just push your light, push button.
My understanding, the fund is restricted to waste minimisation activities, but beyond that.
We've never accessed the fund, and I don't know whether we would be able to.
Someone must have an oversight of it, because it's about 4.6 million of the 50%, which is from Ashburton to Huranui.
Yep.
So it would be interesting for us to find out where those monies are split up.
Yeah, so my understanding was of the total New Zealand pool of monies coming from waste levy, 50% was to go back and be available for local government and 50% for central government. How that 50% that goes to local government's dealt with, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll need to find that out for our purposes.
Good question to ask.
The 185,000 tonnes is just to Cape Valley. We have other rubbish which gets distributed in pits around the district, which also gathers a levy. So there's more than $9 million collected in our region.
Correct.
Yeah, but thanks for that.
Looking currently, our major capital expenditure projects, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but one of the unique things about Cape Valley as a business is we didn't spend $200 million developing a landfill at the start. We develop it as we go along. So this is one of the ways that we can use capital effectively, and it's why we haven't had big borrowings, because we always try and keep a minimum of 12 months, we call it airspace, ahead of us. So
2 years.
Well, we try 2 years, but we've got to keep a minimum of 12 months. So we try and work in that space. But we're developing that as we go along, and we say, well, look, this is what our projection of waste coming in is going to look like, so we need to develop the next cell. And there's a master plan about what we call the cells in the landfill, and they connect together and they also lie on top of each other. We develop those as we go along. So at the moment, in the construction side, we're placing waste in a certain cell, and we're doing construction of another cell. Under the other there, it starts to lead us into what does a landfill produce? It produces two things. It produces leachate, the liquids that come out of waste, and it produces gas, the gas that's released from waste. We are required under our consent to make sure that we can burn 100% of the gas. Now we can do that either by taking it and putting it through generators, or if they're shut down for whatever reason or we can't use those, we have to have capacity and flaring capacity to burn it all. We currently, I'll get you to talk about, we've currently got one flare.
Yeah, correct. So there's one flare currently, but with the growth of the landfill, the gas generation increases. So ultimately we need to put our second flare in pretty much about now. So it's scheduled for later this year, and that will double our flaring capacity and ultimate capacity.
So a flare, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, is another $1.5 million, $2 million?
$1.5 million.
Yeah. So every time you do something like this, you're looking ahead and you're having to spend ahead. You don't spend till you have to, but you've got to spend in that big chunks. The other thing that's happened, and I mentioned that deals with the gas. We've got this liquid that a landfill creates called leachate, and we have to manage that. In the past, we have managed it by re-sprinkling it on the landfill, because that helps the anaerobic process within the landfill to break the waste down. But sometimes we used to get surplus, and we would have to cart that off to the Christchurch wastewater treatment plant. We've now installed a piece of kit. Everything's about $1 million for $1 million, which is called a Benevap, which actually takes energy that's produced by the landfill and burns, evaporates that leachate. So we've now got a system that means we don't have to, unless we've got extreme situations, we don't have to carry that leachate off site.
Gil, if you don't use the gas you get out of the landfill for creating electricity, you flare it off. It's methane, I think, is what you collect. So
methane's 54% of the gas.
Okay. So if you flare it off, burn it, that turns it into carbon dioxide, does it? So Is that a win?
It is, because that carbon dioxide would have been released anyway by the waste naturally breaking down, even if it was left in people's yards. So, look, I'll come back to that because it's a product that I think, and I think the team here would say this, we're investigating what's the value in that and how can we extract value from that CO2. And there are some potential ways of doing that.
Right. The question for Councillor Ellis.
Sorry.
Thank you. Does the weather influence some of this? Like, we're in a bit of a drought season this year, so less moisture coming onto the site. Does that influence your leachates and those sorts of things?
Absolutely. So as the amount of moisture that comes in, that reduces the leachate production. We obviously do what we can to prevent any moisture entering, because the last thing we want is to have to deal with larger volumes of leachate. Moisture also can have a real impact on your gas, and making sure that a moist surface will help seal that surface as well. So numerous different, even the barometric, I could talk all day too, but even the barometric pressure can have an influence on your ability to keep your gas in and retain it. Yeah.
At the moment, and sort of what leads on from that, we have 4 generators. Each generator has the capability of producing 1 megawatt of electricity. Each generator uses about 500 cubic metres of gas an hour, to run, landfill gas an hour to run. It's the methane content that's important. The landfill produces currently in excess of 3,000 cubic metres of landfill gas per hour. We have to manage that gas. We can't just let it escape into the atmosphere. And we manage it by either going into the generators or by flare. We could run more generators at the moment, but we can't even, on the line that we've got from the local electricity company, we can't even export the electricity we're generating. We're restricted to about 2.1, 2.2 megawatts, and we're producing 4. So we're not even using the capacity we've got. That's bound up with the capacity of that line, and Mainpower, which is the local lines company, they have a wind farm proposal up the hill from us. They're proposing to increase that line to give us plenty of capacity, but that proposal's been kicking around for a few years, and it's disappointing that we haven't been able to access, they haven't built that line yet. So we feel a bit constrained in that space, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go ahead. Just a couple of photos. There's a new cell being developed. Talking about landfill gas, and we're onto this already. So over 95% of the expected methane that we generated in financial year 23 was captured, and we always aim at getting 100%. And I think, do you want to talk about it? We're pretty close to 100% now.
Oh, absolutely. We're very close. We manage that for a few different ways, but obviously we're metering and recording what we get, but we also do things, for example, like a monthly drone survey that looks at the methane coming out of the ground and produces a map so that we then can go and, if we had to improve the cover in a situation, for example. But it's a very high proportion, Gil.
Just for those of you that haven't seen it, how do we collect the methane? How do we collect the landfill gas? There's a grid, a 60-metre grid of gas wells across the landfill. And we apply a vacuum, a suction to those. It's called a blower. I don't know why a blower is called a sucker's called a blower, but it is. And it extracts that gas at the required rate to not take oxygen into the landfill, because we don't want that. And that's how we capture the gas. And once we've got it out, it either goes into the generators or it goes up the flare at the moment. Ideally, it would all go into value producing ability and through the generators.
Or to the benefit now.
Or to the benefit now. Just to give you an idea of what that gas means, the gas that we are collecting avoided an equivalent of emission if we just let it rise through the ground on the landfill of 106,000 cars. We use that gas currently to generate sufficient electricity for about 2,100 houses.
And that's the export electricity, so potentially we could double that.
We could double that quite easily. you'll see that I won't go through those other things, but that's, you know, a bit of a sort of picture of what's happening around our landfill gas.
I think it's worth the comment, Gil, that the gas capture activity actually reduces the ETS cost to the customer by 90%.
And we'll actually come to a slide, I think, that's got that shown.
It's actually on there, the third point down.
Yeah.
So.
And we'll see that in a bit more detail in a moment. I mentioned the benefit that evaporates the leachate. That's it. That's what $1 million looks like. And just on the point that Jeremy's just touched on, these are sort of figures around our gas capture, etc. The emission from landfill gas, the certified baseline we had was 262,000. The 2023 audited but as yet unpublished is 267,000 cubic metres. Is that cubic metres yet?
No, it's tons.
Oh, that's tons.
Ton
sorry.
CO2 equivalent.
Tons, yeah, sorry. We destroy, of that, let's just use the 23 figures, we destroy 255,000 tonnes equivalent of that gas by flaring or by using in generators. That leaves us 12,000 of emissions. We add that to the transport and landfill diesel to get waste to the landfill, and so our greenhouse gas footprint is about just at 16,500 tonnes. We've got a forest that sequesters, and if you take that off, it's about just under 7,000 tonnes. You get down to our net emissions of 9.6 thousand tonnes. We are continually trying to reduce that, and you compare that with what happened in 22, a massive reduction of 70%. However, there were some factors in 22, and if you go back to the gas destroyed line, you'll see we were much lower, and that's two things, or primarily two things. We had part of the gas well network shut down because of work we were doing on the landfill, construction work, and we also had during that year we had an accident, I think, which destroyed or interrupted one of the major gas lines, and we had to shut it down. So that just shows the effect. If you don't get it right, you suddenly end up with net emissions much higher than they should be, and that's, we have a huge focus on that, and I guess half your time is spent managing gas.
Yeah, probably about that, Gil, yeah.
I think the point there is, if we're capturing 95% of the gas, if it drops to 94, that's a 20% increase in our emission. So that's why the effort has to be to keep the total up.
100% for us is the magic figure. I think we've probably...
Question from Carolyn.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. If you were benchmarking the Cape Valley enterprise or activities versus another sort of state-of-the-art waste minimisation type of operation, how do you come out?
In the landfill area?
Yes.
Oh, on top.
On top, yeah.
By a mile. Most of the landfills in New Zealand, I'll put it around the other way. Cape Valley is the luxury of being a relatively new designed landfill created from scratch. Most of the others have got a big legacy element in them. Okay. So we've been able to, right from scratch, design it to make sure that it's right up at the top of the heap in terms of capture of gas, etc. And if we're not the best in New Zealand, I'd be very surprised. You might have some other information on that.
I don't think there's any doubt that the landfill as a whole is viewed as the
Gold
prime
standard.
example of gold standard, and as Gil mentioned there, one of the, I call it a luxury, but it's ultimately the newest of the large landfills in New Zealand, which means it's the highest standards and will be used as a baseline for further landfills in the future.
And I'd say it's not only in New Zealand. We get, constant stream of visitors through from, including overseas people coming to see a state-of-the-art, as they might call it, landfill. Because we were lucky. We started from scratch. We didn't have the legacy. And we were able to design it. And this was the advantage of a regional landfill. We had the resource commitment to be able to design it to the best standards. That even reflects, and I mentioned before, one of the early pictorials there was the facilities pad where the containers come in and are dropped. The trucks that bring the containers down the road do not go to the landfill face. That's done quite separately. very few other landfills have that. And I remember, Liz will be sick of me saying this because she's probably heard it before, going to visit a landfill in the States. It was at that stage the largest landfill in the world in Los Angeles. It was called Puente Hills. It's now closed. And they had a situation where everybody, including mum, dad and their trailer, could rock up to the landfill face and dump, like you would remember you could in old dumps. We do not allow that. The only vehicles and the only waste containers that go to the dump are those blue containers. They go down to the face and they're emptied at the face. So we just don't have this mix of people going and onto the face. So that's a huge health and safety gain for us, but it's also a huge efficiency gain. In the sustainability area, we're working hard on energy generation. We've talked about landfill gas to electricity. We also have the opportunity, we're investigating, for up to about 2 megawatts of solar capacity on the site. Now, whether we go down that track or not is a different issue, but we're investigating that. And a third area is working with a number of 2 or 3 parties on the concept of using the energy created by landfill gas into electricity to manufacture hydrogen for use in heavy transport. Now that we're particularly interested in, because you just think of a scenario where the truck that takes your waste to the landfill then fills up with hydrogen to power it to take your waste to the landfill. So that's a great story if we can crack it. We're in the very, very early days, but it's something we're working on quite hard. We could also use hydrogen to power the fleet, the plant that works on the landfill, the compactors, the diggers, dozers, etc. We put this in here because I think it's important that we make the point. We resist any erosion of environmental standards. We have a consent that's got really tight environmental standards. We will vigorously oppose other landfills setting up that don't have those same standards. We will not oppose them on the basis of competition, but we want to make sure it's a level playing field, and more than that, we want to make sure that the community is protected. Because remember, what happened here was when the region got together and said we'll have this highly engineered landfill, it replaced 52 unprotected dumps that were, surprise, surprise, in places like riverbeds, where people said, oh, we've got some rubbish to dump, that's a good place to dump it because we don't use a riverbed. And now we've got, in the West Coast as currently an example, have got major challenges because of erosion of informal landfills, if I can call it that. So we'll vigorously make sure that any application for a new landfill meets the standards that are the best standards that we have to meet, but are also the right standards for the community. Just on our landfill, we expect to remain operating the current facility in the 37 hectares we've got through to 2039, which is when our consent runs out. It may be we've got a little bit of spare airspace beyond that, because what we work on, our asset is airspace. And in that case, we would be applying to ECAN for an extension of the consent, which you'd hope would be a logical thing to do if we're doing a good job. And people say, what happens past that? We have got a couple of other areas on that big 1,300 hectare footprint where we could develop further landfills based on the same geological structure we've got now that we're in. But they would have to go through a full consenting process, and we accept that. But it was one of the reasons we've held on to that land, because it does give flexibility for the future. There's always this dream that communities have that we'll have zero waste. When we started off in the landfill, I think we were getting about 260,000 tonnes a year, and the dream was we'd get by 2020 0 tonnes to landfill. Well, we didn't. We're at now 365,000 tonnes a year. That's life, isn't it? Health and safety. I'm not going to go through that in detail, but we are very proud of our health and safety record in what is quite a difficult industry and a dangerous sector. We've just passed 2,000 days without either a lost time incident or a medical treatment incident, and I am touching wood. Because we do work in a dangerous sector, but we've got a very good reputation with staff, and we monitor and enforce it very carefully, our health and safety protocols. Finally, Turramurina Bush update. We're really proud of this. It's 410 hectares of QE2 conservation area. And got 2 minutes. A little story. David Norton, the Professor of Forestry at Canterbury University, has led this project for us. And his first thing to do was get the stock, because this was a farm and it was farmed, get the stock off and fence it so no more stock can come in, do a bit of planting, and it will grow. After 5 years, it sure had grown. I've never seen a gorse crop like it. It was fantastic. It was all gorse. And I'm going, I'm not so sure about this. 5 years later, so 10 years in, I'm going, I can sort of see what he means, but we're miles away from what the dream is. We're now, another 10 years on beyond that, so roughly 20 years. It is fantastic. And there, for instance, what it looked like from exactly the same spot, because we've got photo spots there, in 2005 to 2023. Forget the colours, look at the ingrowth of bush, and look at gradually all that gorse is almost all of it's gone. Fantastic result. We go further than councils do with long-term planning. We've got a 300-year vision. And the vision is to return that area of Canterbury to lowland, east coast, Canterbury forest. And it will take 300 years. We've broken that down into a lot shorter periods. We've got about a 30-year plan, which is broken into 5-year blocks. We have huge pest control issues there, and I'll just flick up a slide in a minute, which will be the last one. But we invest about $150,000 a year in cash, excluding capital, and we don't put much capital into it, but in terms of planting and pest controls, etc. We work with other entities. We've got corporate planting days, and we encourage the public to use the walkways for Turramurina Bush. And if you haven't had the chance, and particularly in the winter, if it's a nice day and you want a decent drive, a couple of hours up the road and go for a 3-hour walk, it's fantastic. Just to give you an idea of the extent of predator control there's the list of predators, and that through our trapping programs, etc., shows what we're doing. And you'll see that that's the challenge we've got in trying to encourage birds and encourage invertebrates and that sort of thing into this area. It's not just about the bush, it's about the birds and invertebrates. But look at the challenges we've got in controlling those animals. And in addition to that, you'll see down the bottom there, we're always catching deer, and at the moment, pigs are a major issue. Turramurina Bush. And final slide, that's something we've done in conjunction with the local runanga, Tuahureri. It's a po that's built down on the coastal cliff area, and we're pretty proud of that. And if you do go for a walk, you want to go to that spot. It's quite a magical, quite a spiritual spot, and it's on the Turramurina Bush Conservation Estate. Neil, that's it.
Thanks, Gil. That's a very good presentation and enlightened us all on the great work you're doing up there, which is really good. We'll go to questions now. One from Richard.
Yep. I'm a big supporter of Cape Valley, but how do you manage obviously you've got commercial realities of shareholders, the shareholder versus supplier. It's a bit like a dairy industry thing. If you provide the product, you want to pay the little as possible. We want to pay as little as possible to send our rubbish there, but you want to make a big return. You obviously make quite good profits. How do you manage that thing without just saying it was $10 a tonne more this year?
Right.
Sorry.
Carefully. Two things. Remember, if it makes profits, the councils get at least, collectively get half of that back. So they're half shareholder. So those dividends that are returned, half of those go to waste management, half of those go to the shareholder. We also monitor carefully against what the rest of the market's doing in New Zealand, and despite the fact that we're probably we are the best engineered landfill in New Zealand, we are in the bottom quartile of pricing. We watch that very carefully. The other thing we do in terms of the return that we try and get out of it is we manage that so that we think it's a fair return. There's when the original founding documents were set up with the councils and the private sector, the agreement was the long-term target return was set over the life of the landfill, and we try and manage to that. So it's managed within a band, if you like. Given that it's in public, I can't go into that in any more detail, but we do manage it within that band because we're very conscious about that we've got a duty to make sure landfill charges and therefore the waste imposition charge on the community is not too high.
Yep. Just before I go on, the arrangement also with the contractor has a set return on asset as well, so which is audited every three years. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, look, that's a good point, Jeremy. Thank you. I said before that right at the start, we've got on the face of it an inherent conflict. We've got an owner who's also the part owner, the Waste Management New Zealand, who's also the principal contractor. How do we monitor their charges? There's an agreed percentage return they can get. So on the capital they've got invested. So any costs they incur are passed directly through to us at cost. That's audited and regularly audited by an auditor we call a probity auditor, who is appointed by the company, and their role is to check that we are only getting charged true costs, labour rates, vehicle rates, machine rates, etc. What we do beyond that is they've got capital invested, like any movable plant, the compactors, the diggers, etc., are theirs, owned by them. That amount of capital they can get a fixed return on, but no more than that. So even right back at the start, the fundamentals were the returns monitored, and we have all sorts of auditors. We have Audit New Zealand as our financial auditors. We have now in the greenhouse gas area, Toitu as our auditors. We have the probity auditor doing the work that I'm talking about. We have PwC that do a lot of external reviews for us, etc. Some would say we're over-audited, but that's a consequence of the structure we've got, I think.
Thanks, Gil. You're taking 185,000 tonnes of rubbish per year. What's that as a percentage of New Zealand's rubbish? Do you know?
No. I don't. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I don't know the exact number, but I don't believe that our proportion per person is much dissimilar to the average around New Zealand. So I believe the catchment of the landfill is probably in that order of 500,000 people, and you're probably talking around that 750 kgs per person. Drawing back on that point earlier around potentially that 20% kind of mark is actually through the municipal or through the bins on the street. But give or take 3/4 of a tonne per person in a catchment of a landfill would be approximate.
Yeah, so 500,000 compared to 5 million would be at 10%.
We'd be probably about that. I think it'd be pretty fair.
It's about in proportion to the population relative to other areas.
Yep.
I mean, Auckland's obviously the big name, the big player in New Zealand as far as waste.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Councillor Hooper.
Thank you. I haven't had a look at your operation yet, but I look forward to it. You mentioned earlier on use of shingle. You use a lot of shingle. Is that, I was watching the slides and waiting for it to come up, creating a new cell, but what else?
The expert.
Yeah.
This guy's the expert on shingle.
Previous background, I suppose, but there are three primary uses. So one, roading. Secondly, liner protection material. So once we put that HDPE, was a 3-layer liner in on top of the clay for creating a new cell, we also put 1/2 metre of liner protection aggregate, which is essentially, for those familiar, a 19mm premix gravel for concrete sort of thing. And that's an additional assurity around making sure we don't pierce the liner with anything, getting tipped in that area. And thirdly, we also have material that's around the perforated gas wells to allow that gas to be drawn into the wells as well. So that's the three primary purposes.
Councillor Cameron?
How deep is the Cape Valley?
This way?
Yeah.
We haven't got a photo that would help, but For those of you that have been to the landfill, the total depth of it at the moment of waste at its highest point is about 70 metres?
About 50 to 60 currently, and we'll get to about 80 as a whole.
And that's below the ground, or you're building up in a mound or below the ground?
If you go to that photograph of the
So,
cell construction near the start.
Yeah. So nature of it was a valley, so there has been substantial earthworks, but ultimately filling up that valley.
Go back.
Yeah. So it is constructed in roughly 3 metre lifts at any point in time, and progressively moving the gas wells and the face up as the landfill comes up.
Oh, okay. Can I ask two very quick questions?
Perhaps if I can just help you there. If you look at the photo there, and you think of what the initial phase of work was to clear out a valley.
Yes.
The valley existed, but there was some humps and bumps there, to clear out that valley. And then we're filling that valley up. If you look into the middle distance, or the distance there, you can see what looks like a hill.
Yes.
That is waste. And it goes down about another 20 metres below where you're standing there. So, tell you a little story. I remember some years ago, and it wasn't an Ashburton District Councillor, but it was a councillor from a different council, who really wasn't enamoured with waste, and we were standing up towards the top of that photo in the distance there, and it was a woman actually, she asked the question, how much waste is in here, and how deep is it down below? And I said, well, it's about, it might have been 50 metres, 60 metres in those days. And she let me have it. That is absolutely disgusting. That's terrible. There's all this waste and it shouldn't be here and rah, rah, rah. And all these people, and I said, well, some of that's yours. We don't create the waste. We manage other people's waste. And I think that's really important. But that mountain, that hill, is waste.
Wow.
Do you want to comment any further on that in terms of that structure?
No, so that structure that you can see the side of that's intermediate, so that will be connected into in the future with that cell down to the left that you can see the raw earth there. So that is not final landfill. That will be connected in the longer term as the landfill develops.
So where you're standing here, that photo's taken from, will be under waste in the future.
Sure. One more very quick question. If you have toxic materials, I'm thinking particularly like medicines or asbestos or I don't know, acids or whatever. Do they just go in there as well?
I'll get Hayden to answer it.
So there's typically two classifications of waste, one being general that runs through a transfer station, and the second being special waste that runs through under special waste permits. General waste is our general day-to-day, as you'd expect. Special waste is disposed of in trenches within the landfill footprint, but comes with additional constraints as well about offsets from liner and not being compacted. So, for example, asbestos is very important that we don't run a compactor over that and make it airborne. It is purely covered as immediately, same as medical, covered immediately following disposal.
Okay, thank you.
I think there are waste acceptance criteria. So whilst we accept a lot of things, there are some things we can't accept. I'm just trying to think, the fire suppressants,
CFCs, ozone depleting substances.
The ones that were on the airfield in Blenheim area, I'm just trying to think, the chemical additive in fire suppressants and things like that, we can't accept that wasteful stock. And there are a small number of things that we can't accept, so it is managed, it's not a free-for-all.
Yeah. Councillor Ellis, then last one, Councillor Todd.
Thank you. With the proven success of this site, why is there not more government regulation around other areas in the country? I've been to some around the Wellington region, and they are fairly primitive. And why is the government not regulating this industry and putting some standards in place?
Oh, look, I totally agree with you. I don't know. It's interesting to note that, and the Wellington one was one that I can remember not too long ago, they visited to learn about how we manage the landfill. Part of it is the legacy. When the landfill was starting to be built, it hadn't been built to standards, and it's very hard now to retrospectively refit those standards. But I agree with you, and that's one of the points that we're making. As we see new landfills come up, we're not against the competition, we are against it if they don't meet the standards, because it's all about protecting the community for the long term.
Councillor Todd?
Thank you. When there's a police investigation from time to time, and there was one recently, then they have to go to the landfill. They seem to know where to go.
Yep.
So how do you track each
Every
truck?
every container load that comes into the landfill, every container's got a tag on it, and they clock in when they go over the weighbridge, and when it goes to the landfill, it's GISed in terms of where in the landfill it is. So if the police come to us and say, look, in June 2019, something happened, and we want to know on the 25th of June, where in the landfill would that be? We can point them might be a bit deep, but we can point them exactly to it, and they can then scurry around. We don't get involved in that, scurry around digging amongst old waste. And Hayden, you might want to talk, but there's been one very famous case about...
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, Gilbert. And that was just purely, there is a commendation award that was given to the Transwaste and Landfill team, because when one of those situations occurred, the police were pointed in the right spot and they were finding newspapers with the right dates on it. So it was just an example to highlight that it works, the system works, and we are able to show where it's gone at the right time.
Great. Thank you very much, Gil. Thank you, and team, for coming down and sharing that with us. It's very informative discussion we've had and presentation you've given. Very successful, and I'd probably say the governance is a reason for that, and your chairmanship also helps, or is the bulk of that.
No,
so
it's the team,
well done.
the team on the site. We've got an incredibly stable and committed team of people right across, whether it's in the transport side or the management of the actual landfill, and the quality of this is very, very dependent on them, and they're to be congratulated. Now, Neil, what I've got here, and there's not enough to go around, but we brought 2 or 3 brochures with us about the landfill, one about the landfill, one about Turramona Bush, and we know that Ashburton people and Mid-Canterbury people are keen walkers, so there's a couple of walkway brochures there as well.
Thank you. It's a credit to all of you for what you do to get our waste and get rid of it up there. So we've got one more item before afternoon tea. So if you wanted to wait, we'll have a cup of tea in about 10 minutes' time.
Okay, that'd be nice.
And have another chat then.
Look, at any time, if anyone wants to come and visit the landfill, that's an open invitation.
Yep.
We encourage it. It's one of the ways it keeps these guys making sure they do a good job.
Yeah, I think I've been a couple of 3 times up there, I think, in my time here, so there's wonderful, and yeah, thanks for that invitation. Thank you. Oh, no, just sit at the back. You're more than welcome to sit at the back, great. Katie, if I can invite you up now, please.
Right, I am very pleased to be able to introduce some new employees to you all this week. Can I please have Karen Bruce stand up and give a bit of a wave? Karen has joined the finance team as an accounts administrator, and she is backfilling a parental leave at the moment. Can I have Andrew Malcolm please stand up? Andrew has started today as our safety and wellness lead, and we are very excited to have him here. So I'm sure you all will join me in welcoming the Malta Ashburton District Council. This week we are recognising Cherie Doherty for 15 years service with ADC. On talking with Ian Hyde, he said Cherie has performed a sterling work in her time at ADC as part of the planning team. She's responsible for creating and sending out land information reports and administering the surrounding processes, a job that requires a lot of attention to detail and timeliness and has consistently focused on quality and efficiency to achieve outstanding results. To illustrate Cherie's accomplishments, between July 2017 and March 2024, the Council has produced 4,121 limbs, with turnaround averaging around half of the 10 working day legal requirements. Cherie is an important part to the planning team and a great colleague who we are lucky to have.
Thank you, Katie. You're all sorted now, all done. Thank you. Welcome the new starts and hope you have a long, happy and productive working time with us at the Ashburton District Council. So we'll adjourn now for afternoon tea and you're all more welcome to join us for a cup of tea just next door. We'll resume back in 20 minutes for our own committee piece. Thank you.